Now, even though this is the first NAT entry which the router is going to interpret, now traffic going to the remote component 172.16.10.0/24 is no longer going to match on that NAT entry, because in the ACL reference by that NAT statement, I said that traffic destined to source from VLAN 11 and destined to 172.16.10.0 is not going to be matched by this ACL. So now it is going to work, and traffic going to the remote site, to the remote component via the SVTI tunnel is going to be netted by the second line statement. As I stated before, this may not be needed depending on how you configure NAT in there. But just to be on the safe side, you would go on the ACL which matches traffic going out on the internet and do the nice statements for what you want to be netted differently, as it's in my case. Let's make sure the NAT translation table is empty. Let's exit from here. Let's clear the NAT translation because now it's already in there. So if I tell it again, it's gonna match on an existing translation. So once we change the config, we gotta clear the table, because if you don't do this, if we don't clear the translation table, if I'm gonna tell it again, the router is not gonna inspect the NAT configuration. It's gonna match on something which exists in the NAT table. So when traffic goes, and this makes a lot of sense, when traffic goes on the router, doesn't matter if it goes like inside outside or outside inside. So as long as traffic is being switched, is being routed by a router between an inside interface and an outside interface. So when traffic is being routed in any of those two directions, the router first looks in the NAT table, in the translation table, to see if it has an entry for that traffic flow, and if it has, it's going to use what's in the NAT table. If there's nothing in the NAT table, then second is going to look in the NAT configuration to see if that traffic has to be netted. So in my case now, if I'm going to tell it again, if I change the configuration, I'm going to achieve nothing at all, because the translation already exists in there. So I got to clear the translation table to begin with, and then go into PC and tell it again. So router to user and router to user, and now I should get added into 12.12.12.1 the IP address from the SVTI tunnel, and there we go. So I got netted, this is my active session, into 12.12.12.1 as expected. And now if I go out on the internet, I should get added into IP address of gig01. Let's turn it to router 3 now from PCA. Let's say exit and say telnet to 553. Cisco. And if we say who, there we go. This is my active session, and I got netted into the gig01 address of router 1 as expected. So if you go in the translation table, show IP NAT translations, I should see the exact same thing. That if traffic from the inside local address of PCA is destined to the outside local address of the remote side company via the SVTI tunnel, then PCA gets netted. The inside local becomes the inside global, gets netted, padded into the SVTI tunnel interface address. But likewise, if PCA, the same source, now since traffic destined to something routable over the gig01 interface out on the internet, then the same source gets netted differently into the IP address of router's gig01 interface as expected. So this is policy NAT. The same source gets netted differently based on the destination being accessed. Okay. Now, if we do one more thing, this was policy policy dynamic path. If we would want to do policy dynamic NAT, which means I'm going to do the same thing but NAT into a pool. So let's do the same option but now NAT into a pool, which means VLAN 11, as traffic from VLAN 11 goes out on the internet, I'm going to do dynamic path, dynamic NAT, a one-to-one mapping into a pool which contains, in my case, a single IP address, 136.1.31.200. And if traffic goes from VLAN 11 on the SVTI tunnel to that destination, I'm going to NAT it to a pool which contains, like I said, single IP address in my case. Of course, in production environments, you're not going to, as I stated yesterday, in production environments, if you do dynamic NAT, you got to make sure that what you want to NAT, the station E4, is going to be the same exact size as your pool size. Because it's going to be a one-to-one mapping, and as you saw yesterday, if you're left out of addresses in the pool, then traffic is going to be dropped. Not only is it not going to be NATed, but it's going to be dropped. So I'm going to NAT this into a pool of, let's say, 12, 12, 12, 100, or let's say 200 to be in match. Let's configure those two pools and change our NAT configuration. So conf t, I'm going to remove this, I create those two pools, IP NAT pool for NAT on the internet. It's going to be 136.1.31.200 to 136.1.31.200, prefix length doesn't matter, say 24, and IP NAT pool NAT over SVTI 12, 12, 12, 200 to 12, 12, 12, 200, prefix length 24. So I've created the pools. Now, as I said, in this case, we have to use a route map. Let's not use a route map, see what happens. Let's rebuild those two configurations using an ACL and NATing into a pool, and we're going to see why it doesn't work. IP NAT inside, source list the internet into a pool of the internet, and IP NAT inside source list ACL NAT SVTI into the pool of NAT SVTI. Okay, that's a typo in there, but doesn't matter. Section IP NAT and yes, IP NAT. Let's fix that typo just real fast because I have the pool name wrongly configured. So no this, no this, and let's put the name to be IP NAT pool, not poll. So now I'm doing policy dynamic NAT, not policy dynamic path, because I'm using a pool or the overload keyword. And as I stated, let's see why it's not going to work, even though technically speaking. And let's put the other NAT statement as well. Let's say no this IP NAT pool. Let's put it as the proper way, underscore, and then NAT is VI and that. And let's put the other command IP NAT inside source list. And the other list name was do show run include access. The other list was named ACL NAT SVI, and I'm gonna NAT that into the pool of pool NAT SVTI. So do show run section IP NAT. So now, even though this list now does not allow traffic distant to 172.16.10.100, do show access list. As you can see, it doesn't allow traffic distant to the remote company site. Let's see what happens. So let's go out on the internet to begin with. Let's send traffic out of the internet from VLAN 11 destined to router 3, which means I should get NAT config. I should match this NAT statement and get NATed into this pool, which means into the address of 136.131.200. Let's confirm that by going on PCA, CLS. First of all, let's make sure the NAT translation table is empty. Show IP NAT translations. And it is. Let's reopen PCA. Telnet 5553. CISCO. Who? As expected, I got NATed into 31.200. If we look in that NAT table, before we go there actually, let's now try and telnet from PCA over the SVTI tunnel to router 2 to see what happens. So let's go on PCA now. Let's say exit, CLS, and let's say telnet, CLS, clear screen, and telnet 172.16.10.2. Router 2 user, router 2 user. Show who, and as you can see, it looks like I got NATed into the same 31.200. So this is very weird, right? Because if you look, this is first of all not what I wanted to happen, and second of all, if you look at our NAT config, so I matched with both sessions on this entry. Looks like, even though if you say show IP access list, that access list, this ACL show this access, the show IP access, this ACL show IP access list. This ACL should not be used to NAT me if I go to that destination, because it says a deny. But what happens is very simple. Show IP NAT translations. Regular dynamic NAT and static NAT. So not PAT, not the PAT version of dynamic NAT or static, just the static NAT or dynamic NAT, which both of them do a one-to-one mapping. Both of them create the simple translation entry, which is the one-to-one binding. That's called the simple translation entry in the NAT table, and the extended translation entry, which identifies the flow that matched the simple entry in there. So the simple translation entry is the one-to-one binding. The extended translation entry is derived from the simple entry and identifies the flow. You can look at it like this is the parent entry. This is the parent entry, which is created either statically or dynamically. If you do static NAT or dynamic NAT, the parent entry, because both static NAT and dynamic NAT do a one-to-one mapping. And then after the allocation has been done, the other entry identifies the flow, which is the child entry, because it was derived from child entry, because it was derived from the parent entry. So what happens that initially I went out on the internet. I initiated traffic from VLAN 11 out on the internet, and I got properly NATed into that pool of 136.1.31.200. That's okay. But when that had happened, the router has done that one-to-one mapping in there, which is, as you can see, it doesn't identify the flow. It identifies the inside local, the real address, and inside global, the mapped address. So then when I try to go, as I said before, then when I try to send traffic from VLAN 11 through the SVTI tunnel to this destination, I didn't match on the NAT configuration, not because the NAT configuration was wrong, Because again, when a router sends traffic between inside outside or outside inside, the first thing it does, it looks in the NAT table to see if a translation has already been done. And then if it doesn't see something in there, second step is to check the NAT config. So that was the problem, because when router 1 looked in the NAT table, PCA was already assigned this mapping. So then as traffic went out on the SVTI tunnel, that's why it got that traffic, this traffic going from PCA to the SVTI tunnel has been netted. Not again, that traffic has used the existing translation, which was saying that 10.10.11.100 or 200. It is mapped to 136.1.31.200. So that's what I said, that if you do policy dynamic NAT or policy static NAT, you have to use a route map. An ACL is not going to fix this problem. So let's create a translation table. Let's go on PCA, say exit. Let's create a translation table, clear IP NAT translation all. Because again, if I try, even if I fix the config, and then I try to turn it again, I'm going to match again with something which is in the table. So my config is going to be ignored. Now let's change this as follows: section IP access list and IP NAT. Let me put the relevant config into Notepad to change it in there, and then we're going to look it up together. So relevant config is, I don't care about this one, only those two ACLs where I'm defining the traffic flows, and then my NAT statements. So ACLs are good. NAT pool configuration is good. Let's temporarily remove this configuration, the NAT statements. Note this and note this. Okay, so as I said, we have to use a route map to match on those ACLs. We're going to see why. This is going to fix the problem. Route map. Let's say RMap for NAT internet. And I'm going to say match address. Not sure if it's named, but just match address or match access list on that. Of course, it's going to be by default permit 10. Let's confirm this is the proper configuration. Match address, its name or value, like in a class map match. Access. Match IP address in the name. Okay. Match IP address. So in this route map named RMap NAT internet, I match on the ACL NAT internet, and I build a new route map named RMap NAT SVTI, and I match on the ACL named ACL NAT SVTI. And then the pool remains the same, that's okay. And then the NAT statement is going to be changed. That instead of the list, I'm going to use the route map in there. Route map and the route map name. IP NAT inside source route map. There we go. And like I said here, instead of the list, route map and this route map name. So what I changed the configuration is that I have used two route maps to match on each of those two ACLs, matching on traffic which I want to get netted. And then in the NAT configuration, I'm referencing the route map as IP NAT inside source. So NAT the source addresses as configured in the route map into that pool. So let's see why this config is going to work. Show run section IP NAT. Okay. So likewise then, let's go again, first of all, out on the internet. from VLAN 11 out on the internet, I should get NATed to 136.1.31.200, and then from VLAN 11 on the SVT through the SVTI on router 2, I should get NATed to 12.12.12.200. Let's confirm that and see then why it works now. Let's go on PCA, say CLS. Telnet first on the internet, 5553. Cisco, let's say who. And I got NATed as expected into 136.1.31.200. Exit. CLS, and let's say Telnet now to router 2. Router 2 user. Router 2 user. And who. And I see now 12.12.12.200. I see now 12.12.12.200. So let's see why now it worked. Of course, in a production network, it's much more than this. So before I explain you why it worked, it's a lot more than I'm about to explain next. But for the CCNP exam, is going to be good enough. So show IP NAT translations. As you can see, what's missing is the simple translation entry, because that was causing the problem, which was making all traffic to be netted as for the simple translation entry, which was initially created for the first traffic flow. So now with the usage of route maps, we have only extended translation entries. So there's no more one-to-one mapping for PCAs in there. It's only traffic flows, extended entries. Which means now if PCA, so initially when PCA went out on the internet to router 3, it got NATed to, as expected, to the configure pool of 136.131.200. And because this is not a one-to-one binding, it's not a simple translation entry, it's an extended one, then when PCA went to, via the SVTI tunnel, went to router 2, the router looked in the NAT table to see if it has any kind of simple translation entries pre-built one-to-one mappings. And because it didn't find any, it checked the NAT configuration, and it ended up to NAT PCA into 12.12.12.200 as expected. So this is, by design, this is how it should work. Okay. Pretty much we're done with policy NAT now. There's a question from Matthew Christian. If we want to allow NAT to be investigated from outside to inside, do we need to have accesses or change policy on ASA outside phasing interface? So in this example, there is no ASA involved. If you speak about the ASA NAT configuration, we're going to go there a bit later on today. After we finish up the iOS zone-based policy firewall, we're going to go to the ASA NAT, and I'll answer that question. If you go from outside to inside, depends what kind. So it always depends. Depends on what kind of NAT do you have, and what other security levels in there. So it depends on those two if you need an ACL or not. To give you a simple answer now.